Here is the narrative text for Chapter 1, written in a tense, atmospheric, and character-driven documentary style suitable for a voiceover. Chapter 1, The Basement War, Station Hypo versus Washington, 0-10, May 1942. The Pearl Harbor Navy Yard. On the surface, the base is a hive of physical activity. Welders are sparking torches, cranes are lifting steel, and sailors are preparing for a war that has gone disastrously wrong. The wreckage of the battleship Arizona still sits in the harbor, a rusting tomb and a constant reminder of failure. But the most important battle of the war isn't happening on the docks. It is happening underground. Beneath the administration building, behind a heavy steel door that requires a double combination lock, lies a place known as the dungeon. This is Station Hypo. The air here is stale, recycled, and thick with the blue haze of cigarette smoke. There are no windows. The only sound is the rhythmic, hypnotic clacking of IBM punch card machines and the scratching of pencils. The men in this room haven't seen the sun in weeks. They are pale, unshaven, and running on a diet of coffee and amphetamines. They are the Combat Intelligence Unit, and they're led by a man who looks less like a naval officer and more like a wizard, Commander Joe Rochefort. Rochefort is an eccentric genius. He wanders the rows of desks wearing red velvet slippers and a ragged smoking jacket because the air conditioning in the basement is set to freezing to keep the IBM machines from overheating. He is fluent in Japanese. But more importantly, he understands the Japanese mind. He carries a heavy burden. 6 months ago, his team failed to predict Pearl Harbor. He has vowed that it will never happen again. But in May 1942, Rochefort is fighting two wars. One is against the Imperial Japanese Navy. The other is against his own superiors in Washington, D.C. 3,000 miles away, in the polished corridors of the Navy Department, sits OP-20G, the center of naval communications. The officers there, led by the Redmond brothers, view Rochefort's team in Hawaii as cowboys, amateurs. The conflict is over a single question. Where will Japan strike next? The Japanese Code, JN25B, is a monster. It consists of 45,000 five-digit numbers. The code changes constantly. It is a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Washington's analysts have looked at the fragments. They are convinced that the Japanese fleet is moving north towards the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. Or perhaps they are planning to hit the US West Coast, bombing San Francisco or Los Angeles. They are demanding that Admiral Chester Nimitz keep his ships close to the mainland to defend American cities. Rochefort disagrees. He looks at the traffic analysis. He sees the call signs of the Japanese carriers moving towards the Central Pacific. He sees requests for maps of the Hawaiian Islands. He is absolutely convinced that the target is not Alaska. The target is the tiny atoll of Midway. If Rochefort is right, and the Navy listens to Washington, the Japanese will take Midway, threaten Hawaii, and prolong the war by years. If Rochefort is wrong, and Nimitz sends the fleet to Midway, the US West Coast will be left defenseless against an invasion. Caught in the middle of this basement feud is Admiral Chester Nimitz. Nimitz is a calm man, but the pressure is crushing. He takes a risk, he descends into the dungeon, he walks past the armed guards, into the smoke and the noise. He sits on a hard canvas chair next to Rochefort's desk. He looks at the eccentric commander in the smoking jacket. He looks at the charts. He listens to the intuition of a man who has spent years living inside the radio waves of the enemy. Washington calls Rochefort's data guesswork. They order Nimitz to ignore it. But Nimitz senses something in the basement. He senses certainty. However, certainty is not enough. To gamble the entire US fleet, Nimitz needs proof. He needs a smoking gun. He needs to know that the mysterious target code appearing in the Japanese messages AF is definitely Midway. Rochefort leans back in his chair. He rubs his tired eyes. He has an idea. It is a trick, a deception so simple it seems childish. But if it works, it will end the argument with Washington and seal the fate of the Japanese Empire. The basement war is about to reach its boiling point. To the untrained eye, the Japanese Naval Code, known as JN-25B, looked like madness. It was not a simple substitution cipher where A becomes Z. It was a mathematical fortress. The code consisted of books filled with 45,000 five-digit numbers. Each number represented a word, a phrase, or a letter. But to make it unbreakable, the Japanese added a second layer, a random additive number taken from a separate book. To read a single message, an American codebreaker had to strip away the additive, find the root number, and then look it up in a dictionary that they didn't actually have. They were essentially trying to solve a puzzle in a dark room where the puzzle pieces were constantly changing shape. In May 1942, the volume of this madness suddenly spiked. The radio operators at Station Hypo, listening through their headsets to the static of the Pacific, began to hear a surge of traffic. It was frantic. It was urgent. The Japanese Navy was organizing something massive. Rochefort's team began to pull fragments from the ether. They deciphered words like amphibious assault, occupation force, and air superiority. But the most terrifying part of the traffic was a specific two-letter designator that kept appearing over and over again. AF. The Japanese messages were explicit. They were stockpiling fuel for the campaign against AF. They were loading maps for AF. They were organizing bombing runs on AF. It became the obsession of the basement. What was AF? In Washington, the analysts at OP20G were looking at their own charts. They argued that AF likely stood for the Aleutian Islands in Alaska, or perhaps even a location on the American West Coast. They believed the A stood for America, or Aleutians. But Joe Rochefort had a memory like a steel trap. He remembered an intercept from months earlier, back in March. A Japanese seaplane had flown a reconnaissance mission over a specific location and radioed back a weather report. In that report, the pilot had mentioned he was near AF. Rochefort checked the flight logs. On that specific day, a Japanese seaplane had been spotted near only one location, Midway Atoll. The logic was sound, but logic wasn't enough. The stakes were too high for assumptions. Because while the radio waves were full of chatter about logistics and supplies, there was one thing missing. One terrifying silence. The Kido Butai, the First Air Fleet. The aircraft carriers Akagi, Kaga, Soru, and Hiru. They had gone radio silent. This was Admiral Yamamoto's signature move. When the carriers were in port, the radio operators chattered away to fake their presence. But when they went to sea for war, they pulled the plug. They became ghosts. Rochefort knew the carriers were moving. He knew a hammer was about to fall on AF. If AF was Midway, and Nimitz moved the fleet there, they could ambush the Japanese. But if Washington was right, if AF was California, and Nimitz sent his ships to Midway, then the Japanese carriers would appear off the coast of San Francisco with nothing to stop them. The Golden Gate Bridge would be under the shadow of the rising Sunday. The pressure in the basement reached a breaking point. Rochefort was sleeping on a cot in his office. His eyes were red-rimmed. He was certain in his gut that AF was the tiny sentry island of Midway. But Washington refused to believe him. They called it a hunch. They called it dangerous speculation. Nimitz looked at Rochefort and asked the million-dollar question, "Joe, can you promise me it's Midway?" Rochefort knew he couldn't promise. Not yet. He needed to force the Japanese to tell him the truth. He needed to make the enemy speak the name of their target. And so, amidst the mountains of punch cards and the haze of cigarette smoke, the Saltwater Ruse was born. The 19th of May, 1942. The argument between Pearl Harbor and Washington, D.C. has stalled. The men at OP20G in the capital are digging in their heels. They are now officially warning that the Japanese offensive will likely strike the continental United States. They want the carriers kept close to the coast. In the basement of Station Hypo, the mood is dark. Rochefort knows that if the fleet stays near California, Midway will fall. And if Midway falls, Hawaii is next. He is watching a slow-motion car crash, and no one will let him grab the steering wheel. He needs proof, not a theory, not a hunch. He needs the Japanese Navy to explicitly say, "We are attacking Midway." The solution comes from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Commander Jasper Holmes is one of Rochefort's key men. He is a cryptanalyst, but he is also an engineer and a hydrographer. He understands the physical reality of the Pacific Islands. Holmes looks at the map of Midway. It is a tiny speck of coral and sand. It has no rivers, no lakes. Every drop of fresh water on the island is produced by large, loud, industrial desalination plants. If those machines break, the garrison dies of thirst. Holmes approaches Rochefort with a glimmer in his eye. He proposes a plan. It is a classic intelligence mousetrap. What if, Holmes suggests, we tell the commander at Midway to complain about his water? The plan is brilliant in its simplicity. Step 1. Use the secure underwater telegraph cable, which the Japanese cannot tap to send orders to Midway. Step 2. Order the Midway garrison to send an unencrypted radio message, which the Japanese can hear complaining that their saltwater distillation plant has exploded. Step 3. Wait and see if the Japanese intelligence network intercepts the lie and reports it to Tokyo using the code AF. Rochefort takes the idea to Admiral Nimitz. Nimitz listens. He knows it is a gamble. If the Japanese realize it is a trap, they might change their codes entirely, blinding the US Navy. But Nimitz smiles. He approves the ruse. The 20th of May, 1942. The trap is baited. On Midway Atoll, the base commander follows his orders. He instructs his radio operator to send a message in the clear, meaning widely broadcast and easy to decode. The message is frantic. Distillation plant breakdown. Water supply critical. Request immediate resupply. The radio waves ripple out from Midway, bouncing off the ionosphere, traveling thousands of miles across the ocean. Now, the torture begins. The wait. In the dungeon, the silence is deafening. Rochefort and Holmes pace the floor. They are waiting for the echo. They need a Japanese listening post, perhaps on Wake Island or Kwajalein, to pick up the complaint. Then, they need a Japanese intelligence officer to think it is important enough to report to his superiors. And finally, they need him to use the specific designator AF. Hours pass. Then a day. The IBM machines keep clacking, but there is nothing about water. Doubt begins to creep in. Did the Japanese miss the message? Did they see through the lie? Is the AF theory completely wrong? The air in the basement is stifling. The ashtrays are overflowing. The tension is physical. They are playing poker with the entire Pacific Fleet, and they are waiting for the dealer to turn over the river card. Then, on May 22nd, the teletypes come alive. A message is intercepted from a Japanese unit on Wake Island. It is addressed to the headquarters of the combined fleet in Tokyo. It is encrypted in JN25B, but Rochefort's team has enough of the additive keys to strip it naked. The translators hunch over the paper. The Japanese officer is dutifully reporting the American radio traffic he has just heard. He is telling Tokyo that the Americans at a specific location are having infrastructure problems. He writes, "This unit reports that AF is suffering from a freshwater shortage." Rochefort reads the slip of paper. He doesn't smile. He doesn't cheer. He simply nods. The trap has snapped shut. Midway complained about water. The Japanese reported that AF was out of water, therefore, AF is Midway. The mystery is solved. The Aleutian theory is dead. The California theory is dead. Rochefort grabs the decrypt. He doesn't bother with a memo. He walks straight out of the basement, up the stairs, and into Admiral Nimitz's office. He has the smoking gun, and he is about to hand Nimitz the keys to the biggest ambush in naval history, the 27th of May, 1942. The Saltwater Ruse has worked. Rochefort and his team in the basement know that AF is Midway, but knowing the target is not enough. The Pacific Ocean is 64 million square miles. Knowing the enemy is going to Midway is like knowing a burglar is coming to a city. You still don't know which street he will use, or exactly what time he will break the window. If Admiral Nimitz sends his carriers to Midway too early, they will run out of fuel waiting. If he sends them too late, the island will already be burning. He needs the timeline. He needs the date. In the dungeon, the team is now working on the most complex layer of the JN25B code, the date cipher. The Japanese Navy does not simply write June 4th. They use a separate, encrypted table to disguise dates and times. On the morning of May 27th, the breakthrough happens. The team intercepts a massive, multi-part message. It is the final operational order from the Japanese High Command. It is the master plan for the invasion. But it is riddled with holes, garbled numbers, and missing code groups. Rochefort's best cryptanalysts, including Lieutenant Joseph Finnegan, huddle over the papers. They are working backwards, using logic, intuition, and the fragments of previous messages to fill in the blanks. They are trying to solve a crossword puzzle where the clues are in a language they don't speak, written in invisible ink. Slowly, the numbers begin to align. The date table is cracked. The message reveals that the Japanese attack force will launch their airstrike on end day -2. Finnegan does the math. The calculations point to a specific day on the calendar, June 4th, but the golden message gives them even more. It reveals the direction of approach. The Japanese carriers will approach Midway from the northwest on a bearing of 325 degrees. Rochefort has seen enough. He doesn't wait to shave. He doesn't change out of his smoking jacket. He grabs the sheaf of papers and heads to headquarters. The meeting that follows is the stuff of legend. Admiral Nimitz is sitting with his staff. He is looking at the intelligence reports from Washington. The experts in DC are still arguing. They are now suggesting the attack might happen in mid-June. They are still worried about the West Coast. They are hedging their bets. Then, Rochefort speaks. He doesn't hedge. He doesn't say maybe. He tells Nimitz, Admiral, the Japanese will attack Midway on the morning of June 4th. They will approach from the northwest on bearing 325. They will be detected at 175 miles from the island at approximately 6 hours. The room goes silent. This is a level of precision that is unheard of in warfare. Rochefort is predicting the future down to the hour and the mile. Nimitz looks at his intelligence officer, Edwin Layton. He looks at Rochefort. He has to make the ultimate decision. He has 3 aircraft carriers, the last line of defense for the United States. If he sends them to the coordinates Rochefort has given him, and the Japanese aren't there, he leaves Hawaii defenseless. If he sends them there and it's a trap, the war is lost. Nimitz looks at the disheveled codebreaker. He sees the exhaustion, but he also sees the absolute conviction. Nimitz nods. Very well. He picks up the phone. He ignores Washington. He issues Operation Plan 29-42. He orders the USS Enterprise, the USS Hornet, and the limping, battered USS Yorktown to sail immediately. They are not sent to defend the coast of California. They are sent to a specific patch of empty ocean northeast of Midway, a place on the map that the Americans call Point Luck. The Japanese fleet is sailing in radio silence, believing they are invisible. They believe they are the hunters. But thanks to the message decrypted on May 27th, they are sailing directly into the crosshairs of 3 American carrier decks. The ambush is set. The hunters have become the prey. The 28th of May, 1942, Pearl Harbor. The order has been given. Admiral Nimitz has pushed his chips to the center of the table. Under the cover of darkness, Task Force 16 slips out of the harbor. It is led by the legendary Admiral William Bull Halsey. But he is sick with a severe skin rash, confined to a hospital bed. In his place stands Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, a cool, calculating man who has never commanded carriers before. He commands the USS Enterprise and the USS Hornet. They are heading for a spot on the map that doesn't exist. It has no name. It is just a set of coordinates. Latitude 32 degrees north, longitude 173 degrees west. The sailors call it Point Luck. It is a patch of empty ocean, roughly 350 miles northeast of Midway. It is the perfect flanking position. If Rochefort is right, the Japanese fleet will sail right past them, exposing their vulnerable sides to an American airstrike. But Spruance is short one carrier. The USS Yorktown, battered and broken from the Battle of the Coral Sea, is still in the dry dock. The engineer said she needed 3 months of repairs. Nimitz gave them 3 days. In a miracle of industrial will, 1,400 tradesmen swarmed the ship. They weld steel plates over the gaping holes in her hull. They shore up the bulkheads with timber. They fixed the elevators. On May 30th, the Yorktown, the ship, the Japanese, believe they have already sunk limps out of Pearl Harbor to join her sisters at Point Luck. She sails with repair crews still on board, welding furiously as the ship cuts through the waves. The 2nd of June, 1942, the trap is set. At Point Luck, the weather is overcast. The seas are gray. 3 American carriers sit in silence, radio listening watches maintained, waiting for a ghost. Hundreds of miles to the west, the ghost is approaching. The Kido Butai, the Japanese strike force, is sailing in magnificent formation. Admiral Nagumo is on the bridge of the Akagi. He is confident. His intelligence report tells him that the American fleet is still anchored in Pearl Harbor. He believes he has achieved total surprise. He believes the Americans are sleeping. He has no idea that 350 miles to his east, 54 American dive bombers are already fueled, armed, and waiting for the order to start engines. June 3rd passes. The tension on the American ships is unbearable. Every sailor knows the odds. They are outnumbered 4-3 in carriers, and heavily outnumbered in support ships. If the intelligence is wrong, if Rochefort missed the date by even 1 day, or the location by 50 miles, the American fleet could be encircled and annihilated. Narrator Dawn, the 4th of June, 1942. This is the moment of truth. In the basement at Pearl Harbor, Joe Rochefort is pacing. He is wearing the same smoking jacket. He hasn't slept in 48 hours. Admiral Nimitz is in his office staring at the phone. At 5:30 a.m., a PBY Catalina scout plane, flying from Midway, spots a smudge of smoke on the horizon. The pilot breaks radio silence. Many planes heading Midway, bearing 320, distance 150. Then, minutes later, another report. 2 carriers and battleships, bearing 320, distance 180, course 135, speed 25. Nimitz looks at the chart. He looks at Rochefort's prediction from a week ago. The prediction said, northwest approach, bearing 325 times 6. The reality, northwest approach, bearing 320 times 550. The error margin is 5 degrees and 10 minutes. It is a navigational miracle. Rochefort didn't just break the code, he practically wrote the Japanese schedule for them. At Point Luck, the waiting is over. Admiral Spruance looks at the plot. The Japanese carriers are exactly where the ghost hunters said they would be. They are currently launching their planes against Midway, meaning their flight decks are busy, and their combat air patrol is distracted. Spruance gives the order, launch everything. As the American Dauntless dive bombers roar off the decks of the Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, the intelligence war officially ends. The shooting war begins. The Japanese are about to lose 4 aircraft carriers in a single day. They will blame bad luck. They will blame the fog of war. But history knows the truth. The Battle of Midway wasn't won by the bombs dropped at 10:25 a.m. It was won in a windowless basement in May. It was won by men in slippers who fought with mathematics, intuition, and an unshakable belief that they could read the mind of the enemy. The ambush at Point Luck was total. And as the sun rose over the Pacific on June 4th, the rising sun had already begun to set.